I don't care how many players you're missing or how many young kids you got. If you're winning one game in a year, you've had a fail. You don't win a minor premiership by chance. You win it by hard work, discipline, commitment, selflessness. All in all, he's had a really good season and he will win the club champion award. But they need to flourish, and they need to flourish soon if Andrew McQualter is to be in the West Coast Eagles coaching position long term.
Hello, I'm Mitch Keating and welcome to The Outer Wing, brought to you by TABtouch. Real punters play here. As always, I'll be joined by Digby Beacham out west to discuss Fremantle's premiership prospects and a review on West Coast 2026 campaign. Let's get into it. All right, starting with the Dockers Diggers, minor premiers they've got here. They're climbing this mountain, but the hardest part's to come if they want to get to the summit. What's the kind of temperature test on the Dockers at this point?
Good morning, Mitch. Well, I think the one thing with Fremantle is they now know exactly what's in front of them. They've been basically treading water, haven't they, for 8 to 10 weeks because we knew they were going to finish on top of the ladder, and I suspect maybe their motivation levels have waned ever so slightly. And I'll put my hand up. I got horribly wrong last week. I thought they would take care of Carlton, but then they rested a couple of players, and you could see in the course of the game there were players getting a rest, be it a Bolton or a Jackson and the like. So the game time was managed. Their motivation levels now are going to be really, really high. They get a home qualifying final to kick off the traditional finals path. Against Hawthorn. That'll be in front of nearly 60,000 people. Provided they win that, then they get a home prelim. So for me, I'm still all chips in, as I have been all season with Fremantle, Mitch.
So how big is a concern? 2 losses in their last three in the lead up. As you mentioned, they've been able to manage players, and you'd hope they're still eyeing 100% come match day with what they're putting in. But do you draw too much on the 2 losses in their last 3?
I think you can look at it both ways. I'll be glass half full, and you get to that stage as an athlete, and I suspect you just think, well, does it really matter? Am I dog hungry, or is my belly pretty much full? I think they probably haven't been dog hungry, and their bellies have been near the top. But that changes now. They know that. They know they've got some work to do. They know they have to avenge that really poor showing against Gold Coast in the elimination final 12 months ago. They've ticked all the boxes, and we have seen when they're up and going and when they're really invested emotionally and also physically, they can be the testing material. You don't win a minor premiership by chance. You win it by hard work, discipline, commitment, selflessness, good coaching, availability. So many factors come into it. They've got them all in spades, and I think it's going to carry them a long way.
Well, availability was one of the words you used there, and it's probably been something that's buoyed their premiership prospects throughout the year, given how healthy they've been for most parts of the season. Obviously, the Brennan Cox injury has come at an untimely period of their season, but like you said, they managed to rest Jai Amos after his little niggle last week and some in-game stuff as well. So do you think they're probably the most primed side from an availability and health standpoint heading into the finals?
Yeah, and things can change, can't they, Mitch? You know that. I think we all do. It can change in the matter of an instant. So, look, Brennan Cox is going to be a significant out. Now, we have seen Oscar McDonald have some really good form late in the season. There was even the conversation, wasn't there? Is he better placed for Fremantle than what Brennan Cox is? So, look, that's going to be a loss. They'll get back Jai Amos for that final against Hawthorn, and we know that he's had a really good back half of the year. In fact, he's had an excellent year. Jai Amos. So you'll get him back. You'll get back Chapman. Now, Chapman may well find himself on Nick Watson to start proceedings next week. So he was rested, and Sam Switkowski was rested. Sam Switkowski's a really interesting player for Fremantle, highly important. And if you backtrack through Sam's record, he's lethal fresh. He's really, really good when he's come back from a concussion or an injury. And I think Fremantle will be hoping that trend continues against the Hawks.
Obviously, one thing, if we circle back to Brennan Cox, if the timeline ends up being preliminary final weekend and fingers crossed the Dockers get through to the penultimate weekend of the series, how tough is that going to be a call for Justin Longmuir to make when he's got a player who's been a staple in his side for most of the year, but then potentially shaking up a winning formula should the McDonalds and the Ryans lift their weight in his absence?
Yeah, it's a really good call. All I can say, and I've been quite insistent throughout the year, Mitch, here, is that the Fremantle Match Committee, Justin Longmuir in particular, hold Brennan Cox in a very, very high regard. They love him. They love what he brings to the table. Now, others outside the four walls will sometimes watch Brennan and think, Brennan, a bit of urgency, please. It wouldn't go astray. Hunt the football, stand on your man a little bit more attentively. So he can give that sort of apathetic impression, but he cares, he's respected, and he's a very good interceptor. And that's what Fremantle do like. But we'll just have to wait and see. But it'd be a big call, wouldn't it, to go for a player who missed a bit of football, came back, has done a calf, and then you go with him in a prelim. It's the old, what we've been talking about with Hayden Young. Do they rest him? Do they play him? You have to rip the Band-Aid off now. You can't be sort of guiding and nurturing and protecting players throughout the course of September. They're fit and they're all in, or you go a different direction.
Now, I'm not saying anything new in that a finals game is absolutely massive, and particularly for Fremantle, a home qualifying final. A win puts them into a home prelim, one win away from a grand final berth, but a loss could lead to a really tough road, given it likely means they might play a Geelong in a semi-final, and potentially have to go through Brisbane in a prelim to get to that grand final. So how much does that add to what is normally an already pretty big game next Thursday night?
Yeah, stakes are high. They're high. It's eyes wide open stuff, isn't it? You know exactly what's in front of you, and you know the carrot and/or what's the contrasting emotion that you're going to be feeling if you don't get the job done. So they'll start favourites. You mentioned the price there with TABtouch, Mitch, around that $1.40 mark. I'd be expecting that they can get the job done against Hawthorn. Now, Hawthorn gave them a scare earlier in the year, and then we saw a bit of the old Wharfie time late, which rattled a few of the Hawthorn players. So whether that's invoked again, I don't know. But look, I think Fremantle, all bases are loaded. Yes, they won't have Brennan Cox, but all in all, they're going to be pretty healthy, rested, and they'll get an opponent who's had to crisscross the Nullarbor a couple of times late in the year, and that's always not a great thing for an interstate side, i.e. a Victorian side coming west.
We'll have a massive preview for next week's qualifying final on the outer wing, but for this week, that's Fremantle done. And if we look into the West Coast Eagles' 2026 season, 4 wins, plenty of positives in the McQualty era, not quite as many as they got a couple years ago when they picked up 5 in 2024, but plenty of green shoots, still a lot of concerns. What's your kind of immediate pass-fail on West Coast season?
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night, Mitch, and I've actually come up with a D+. Now, that might sound really harsh, but they were off a 1-22 campaign last year, which is an F. I don't care how many players you're missing or how many young kids you got. If you're winning one game in a year, you've had a fail. It's flat out fail, capital F. So they were trending to be C, I thought, midway through the year, West Coast, but their back half of the year hasn't been good, and they were poor again against Hawthorn. Bit wet. But Hawthorn put that game to bed in the initial 15, 20 minutes. They struggled to score. They didn't cover the ground the week prior against GWS. They hit the wall. They've won their 4 games. So, yes, they've improved on what they did last year, but I still don't think it's sufficient. So they've got work to do. Absolutely they do.
But who was the shining light for them this year? Who was the out-and-out star player that they... at least who can potentially, hang their head high and be happy with their campaign?
Well, it'd have to be the John Worsfold medalist, and that's what I'm saying. I think he wins the John Worsfold medal in Harley Reid. He had a super year. Like, I was pushing for him to be included in the All-Australian squad, and I must admit I was very surprised that he didn't find his way into that squad, even with what happened with the Sydney boys and them not being available. I thought it was a no-brainer that Harley Reid would force his way in. So, look, he's got to tidy up some areas of his game. I think the free kick count on the weekend with that one with Jai Newcombe pushed him to 67 free kicks against for the year, which is a staggering number. So he's got to be better in that area. But all in all, he's had a really good season, and he will win the club champion award and a deserving winner. So he was the shining light. Young Willem Dersma was good. Bailey Williams took a really significant step forward and was rewarded with a big multi-million-dollar contract extension. Jake Waterman played some good football, but he wasn't as effective in front of goal as we've seen. I think Job Shanahan's a player. Josh Lindsay's a good one. Cooper Duff-Type was going to be okay. So you're right, there are some green shoots there, but they need to flourish, and they need to flourish soon if Andrew McWalter is to be in the West Coast Eagles coaching position long term.
And if that is to happen, they need a lot of improvement from a lot of players. Who was probably one that did take the step this year from being a handy, good role player to being a key part of this list build?
Yeah, look, I think some of their senior players just underachieved. I was quite glowing last year with Liam Baker, who was elevated to the co-captaincy when Oscar Allen defected to Brisbane. He had a poor year. His co-captain, Liam Duggan, had a poor year, was managed on the weekend. So what's going on there? Jack Graham can't get his body right. Elliot Yeo's best, really good, but he's slowing up. So some of their senior players need to show the way. And I know we're banging on again about that, but some of the kids are all right. They're going to be okay. But these senior boys need to show the way. They need to set the right example, and they need to be able to perform at a consistent level, Mitch. And that's not what we've seen often enough. So again, hopefully they get a full year out of Brandon Starcevic. He was the big off-season recruit. Didn't play for the first half of the year because of some leg injuries. Young Devon Robertson. Devon Robertson blew his knee out. He missed the majority of the season. So they've got some personnel issues that they need to work through. Where are we at with Harry Edwards of the concussion? So there's some things there on the table that they need to sift through. We've had the exit meetings, they've had the exit meetings, as have all the clubs. But the shell of West Coast is there. Another good draft. Be active in the trade period as well. But they just need to find a way to inject some more talent, either mature talent or young talent, into that football club.
So what does come next? What's the number one thing they're circling on top of their board as they head into another off-season? What's going to be the big focus for West Coast and what they can manage between now and round one next year?
Well, they just need to get as fit as they possibly can. I know every club's in the same boat, but they just have to find a way to infiltrate some high-end talent into that football club. Now, it's not going to be easy, Mitch, because are you really, as a free agent, looking to go to West Coast? Or would you look at, say, a Fremantle if you're heading west? Well, I think Fremantle's a closed shop. I really do. I don't think there's much that they need, and their salary cap's pretty much at the bursting point, I would have thought. But, West Coast, they are a big club still, and when you go to West Coast, you're well looked after. There's a lot of corporate support. There's a lot of opportunities beyond football. So they do take care of their players. What that looks like, I don't know, but I would suspect that the list management team is on the phone and has been for some time to a lot of players on the East Coast asking the question, and some of those should be West Australian boys.
We'll have plenty more to recap on West Coast season across the coming weeks on the outer wing, but that's them done for this week at least.
Could a mullet with tightly tapered sides reduce wind resistance, allowing for faster acceleration off the mark? Now that's something to think about. What are you really gambling with?
And we'll get into your list of the week, Diggers. It has been All-Australian Week, Awards Week. Great to see Murphy Reid being recognised with a few awards, and that included a spot in the All-Australian side, one of 5 Dockers alongside fellow first-timers Luke Jackson and Josh Tracy, with Shea Bolton and Jordan Clark also in there. It was a big night for the Dockers crew on Tuesday. What were your big surprises though from, I guess, the All-Australian squad being announced on Monday to the team being selected and announced on Tuesday night? Like, give me your leading surprises from the selections and the misses or the makes.
Yeah, look, it was an interesting one, wasn't it? Because there was a couple of Sydney players you would have thought would have been in the mix, and we know the reasons why they weren't considered. So, look, in fear of upsetting everyone on, involved with the St Kilda Football Club, including Nick Splitter, I would think that Callum Wilkie is fortunate to get a gig ahead of Alex Pearce. Now, some will say you're kidding yourself, but I think his role as the captain of the Fremantle Football Club and the manner in which he's defended and led was worthy of being recognised. So I'm disappointed for Alex that he didn't get the gig. I thought he might have got a gig there in that back six, in particular the fullback position ahead of Cal, but he didn't, so that's okay. So that's one where I think a Fremantle player has been snubbed. Now, I'm a huge Murphy Reid fan, don't get me wrong. I think he's a talent. He's an extraordinary talent. but I'm perhaps somewhat surprised, again, in fear of upsetting Fremantle. I'm upsetting a lot of people this morning, Mitch, that he got the nod ahead of Isaac Rankin. I'm a huge Isaac Rankin fan, and his last 4 to 6 weeks, the numbers that Isaac's produced, I thought were worthy of consideration. I'm sure he was considered, but I'm surprised he didn't find his way into that side, albeit even on the bench. As for Josh, as for Luke, I'm really happy that they were recognised. Josh Tracy's had a superb season, and Luke Jackson, but for Max Gawn and the heroics, and having watched him very, very closely against the Bulldogs on the weekend, it's phenomenal the influence that he has on games. Luke would have led that following division, so I'm really, really happy for those boys.
Now, I think I read that Luke Jackson's first All-Australian selection comes at the same age that Max Gawn got his first, and we know Max now to be a record 9-timer. Do you think that's a path that Luke could soon blaze himself with the trajectory he's on?
Yeah, well, he's had an outstanding season, Luke. And again, he's probably been impacted a little bit over the back half of the season by where Fremantle have finished, Mitch, and that they've managed his minutes big time. You look at Luke Jackson's minutes in the back half of the season as opposed to what we saw in the front half, chalk and cheese, where Max has just toiled like Max does and just been enormous, Herculean. So, look, he's well and truly deserving of that ruck position and the starting ruck position, but Luke Jackson, I think, is going to be part of the All-Australian conversation for many seasons to come.
And on the West Coast side of the fence, again, no players in the extended squad. That's 2 years in a row now. No players in the All-Australian team as a whole. I think we had Waterman and McGovern a couple years ago. So Harley Reid, not in the squad. Do you think that was the right call? Would you have had him in the 46?
Yeah, absolutely. Would have. I would have had him in the squad for sure. I think, and one thing, he's a third-year player, and he's battling in the midfield, and he doesn't have a lot of allies. He's not exactly loaded up with talent alongside him. So he's done a lot of the heavy lifting, and sometimes I think he sort of acts out, and that's why you see some of these undisciplined acts, or tackles, the spats, the back and forth with umpires, because he's just shouldering so much of a burden. So I'm disappointed for him. Look, he's a big boy. He'll be fine. I don't think he's going to lose any sleep over it, Mitch. But I think you'll find that Harley Reid will be considered next year, provided he has a good year. And, he's got a body of work now. Like, he's going to go into next year as a 22-year-old. He'll be a club champion, played 60 or 70-odd games. He's going to be a leader of that football club sooner rather than later in a leadership group co-captain role. I would have thought he could have found his way in. Jake Waterman, had he kicked accurately, might have found himself in the squad as well. As you said, he is an All-Australian previously, but we know that radar wasn't working throughout 2026.
And Diggers, you got some bets for us to finish off the show.
Yeah, well, I'm still chips in, Mitch, with Fremantle, and I know Brisbane are the favourites now with TABtouch, $2.70. I still think the $2.90 about Fremantle is a good price, because I'm expecting they win that first qualifying final, so they get into the prelim, they're rested, they'll start favourites regardless of who they play in that prelim at home, and then you get a 120 minutes to show off on the big stage at the MCG. And their most recent trip to the MCG, they were pretty good. They didn't get it done against Melbourne, but I think, they didn't have Pearce on that occasion. They were a little bit lackadaisical at key stages, I thought, so they can come on from that. So, yeah, Fremantle $2.90 with TABtouch. And look, and we are projecting here, Mitch, if they are to get to a grand final, and if they are to win a flag, someone like a Shea Bolton is going to be the cream on top for mine, and he's currently $19 in futures markets for a Norm Smith medal. I think that's worth a shilling or two.
Well, there you go. Thanks again, Diggers, for jumping on the Outer Wing, brought to you by TABtouch. Remember to gamble responsibly, and we'll see you next week.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.